Are wood cutting boards actually better than plastic? What about end grain wood versus edge grain wood? And do stainless steel and titanium boards have any real advantages, or are they just hype? To find out which type of cutting board is the best, I tested every material, including plastic, several types of wood, bamboo, composite, rubber, stainless steel, and titanium. To see which boards dull knives the fastest, I sharpened identical knives until their edges were as similar as I could get them. Then I dulled each knife with 300 rocking cuts and 300 straight chops. I used a weighted magnet to apply consistent force. After that, I remeasured the sharpness. To see how loud each board is to cut on, I recorded the sound level of 20 rocking motions and 20 chops, and I compared the averages. To test odor retention and staining, I chopped and mashed garlic, beets, and chipotle peppers on each board, let them sit for 20 minutes, then washed them. And to give you the full picture, I reviewed the most relevant scientific studies on board sanitation, microplastics, and material safety. As I used each board over several months, I tracked things like warping, cracking, slipping, surface damage, and how it feels to cut on them. In this video, I share the results of these tests, break down the real pros and cons of each material, and explain why the safest option isn't what most people think. Plastic boards are appealing because they're inexpensive, lightweight, and dishwasher safe. But there are some downsides. So let's review my tests and the scientific research. For my knife dulling test, I used a BESS certified sharpness tester. When you lower the knife onto the wire clip, the scale shows how many grams of pressure it takes to break the wire. The lower the number, the sharper the edge. The knife I dulled on the plastic board started with a sharpness of 181, and after dulling it, it finished at 246. This 65-point drop ranked it 7th out of the 10 board materials I tested. Fortunately, plastic didn't stain from the beets or chipotle peppers, and it didn't hold on to any garlic odors. And it also ranked middle of the pack in terms of noise levels. I mentioned plastic boards are dishwasher safe, but the high heat can sometimes make the board warped and wobbly. A wobbly board is not great, but my biggest issue with plastic cutting boards comes down to 2 health concerns. Before I get into that, I want to quickly thank GoDaddy for sponsoring this video. When I first started Prudent Reviews 8 years ago, the first thing I did was use GoDaddy to register the domain. But today, GoDaddy does so much more than that. If you're starting a new business or upgrading your current one, their AI tool, GoDaddy Aero, makes it simple to get started online in just minutes. Let's say you wanted to start a business like mine, but instead of reviewing kitchen gear, you wanted to review vacuum cleaners. In just a few clicks, Aero will suggest the best available domains and build a coming soon website for you while you prepare for the real launch. From there, you can pick a theme, adjust the logo, update headlines and images, add sections or navigation, and even change the entire layout. Everything's customizable and super simple. And since it's powered by AI, you don't need to write copy or design from scratch. Just click and Aero generates the options instantly. If you're ready to start your dream business, just click the link in the video description to try it out. All right, so I mentioned that there are 2 health concerns with plastic cutting boards. First, the surface scars up quickly. And once those deep grooves form, they can trap bacteria. A University of Wisconsin study found that bacteria can survive for hours in those cuts, even after washing. So you really have to clean them carefully and replace them once they get heavily marked up. The second issue is microplastics. When I was doing my dulling test, I noticed plastic dust on the knife, and that lines up with the recent research. A 2023 study conducted by researchers at North Dakota State University showed that chopping on plastic cutting boards can release millions of microplastic particles into food every year. The impact of ingesting these microplastics on humans is still unknown, but studies with human cells and mice show enough risks to strongly consider one of the many alternatives. Wood cutting boards come in several varieties, and I tested 4 boards made of walnut, teak, and maple, but there are many other options. The main difference comes down to hardness. Softer woods are easier on knives, but mark up faster, while harder woods are more resistant to surface damage, but can dull blades a little quicker. There are also 2 main types of wood boards, edge grain and end grain. With end grain boards, the fibers stand vertical. They cost more to make, but many people believe they're worth it because the knife edge slips between the fibers instead of cutting through them. This helps preserve sharpness and reduces marks on the board, since the fibers naturally close back together after each slice. Edge grain boards have horizontal fibers, so each cut severs them and dulls knives faster, at least in theory. In reality, the difference is minimal. Both types of wood boards get marked up, but both can be sanded smooth. In my dulling tests, end grain boards had a slight advantage, but not by much. If you like the checkered look of end grain, go for it, but there's not much of a difference in performance. Regardless of construction, wood as a group performed really well in my dulling test. Only one other material was more gentle on knives. Another big benefit of wood is the sound and feel. All 4 boards were noticeably quieter than plastic, composite, and metal. And the surface itself feels soft and smooth under the knife. A lot of people assume that plastic cutting boards are more sanitary than wood, but studies show the opposite. The University of Wisconsin study found that bacteria survive and multiply in plastic grooves, but when left on wood, they get absorbed below the surface and don't survive. That said, if you wash either material thoroughly after each use, the risk is minimal. The biggest drawback with wood is maintenance. You need to oil it regularly, hand wash and dry it thoroughly, and store it upright while it's still finishing drying. Since wood absorbs moisture, it expands and contracts, which can lead to cracking or splitting if you don't keep up with the care. It's also prone to staining and retaining odors, but a few washes usually remove both. Bamboo cutting boards look like wood, but bamboo is actually a type of grass. It grows extremely fast, which makes it more sustainable and cheaper to produce. These boards look nice, but in my opinion, they don't have the same natural beauty as hardwood. The grains are very straight, which gives them a more uniform look with less character. Bamboo is harder than most woods because it contains silica, which helps it resist cut marks and surface wear. However, that hardness makes it tough on knives. In my dulling test, it ranked 6th out of 10, and it performed worse than all the hardwoods I tested. It was also one of the loudest surfaces at over 75 decibels. Bamboo boards are also usually thinner than wood, which keeps them lightweight but makes them more prone to warping. And because they're made from many thin strips glued together, the seams can open up or splinter, especially if the board absorbs too much moisture. In terms of stains and odor, the board I tested held a little bit of garlic odor and showed faint staining, but it faded after a second wash. Composite cutting boards are made by compressing layers of paper or wood fiber with food-safe resin. The result is a thin but dense board that looks a bit like wood, but it feels harder and slicker. One of the main selling points is durability. Because composite boards are so dense and hard, they resist cut marks better than wood, and they won't warp or crack as easily since they're a single solid piece rather than multiple glued pieces. They also don't stain or hold on to odors, and they're dishwasher safe. That said, these boards can be hard on knives. In my testing, the composite board dulled the knife by 117 points, ranking it 8th out of 10. It was also louder than plastic, wood, and bamboo. Compared to wood, these boards are more affordable and much easier to maintain, but they're hard, loud, and you almost always need a non-slip mat or a wet towel underneath to prevent them from sliding. Rubber cutting boards aren't as common in home kitchens, but they're very popular in Japanese restaurants where chefs use extremely sharp knives. One of the most well-known brands is Hasegawa. This board has a wood core for stability and a soft rubber outer surface. In my testing, rubber was the best overall material for preserving sharpness. The knife only lost 10 points in my dulling test, which ranked it 1st out of all 10 boards. It was also the quietest board by far. The soft, textured surface not only dampens sound, but it also keeps the knife stable and prevents food from sliding around. It also held up well against stains and odor. This Hasegawa board is dishwasher safe, but some brands in this category are not. The biggest thing to consider with this type of board is that you might need to change how you cut. Because it's softer and absorbs the force of your knife, fast chopping and rocking motions don't work as well. The grippy texture makes it harder to slide the knife across the board. It's designed for slicing, not rocking. I've been getting a ton of questions about these metal cutting boards, specifically stainless steel and titanium. So I tested one of each. These boards are marketed as durable, sanitary, scratch resistant, and easy to clean. But in my testing, they were by far the worst performers. The titanium board dulled the knife edge by 444 points, the single worst result out of all 10 boards. I retested it 3 times and got similar terrible results. To double check, I took 2 brand new ultra sharp Miyabi knives with the same steel and hardness and dulled one on the titanium board and the other on an end grain wood board. The one I dulled on the titanium board went from 205 to 433, and the one I dulled on the wood barely lost any sharpness. The performance of the stainless steel board wasn't as extreme, but it still wasn't good. It dulled the knife by 184 points, which ranked it 9th out of 10. Both were also the loudest surfaces I tested. On top of that, they're extremely thin. That keeps the weight down, but it also makes food harder to scrape off and causes the boards to slide on the counter. Also, the thin edges are somewhat sharp, so you need to be careful handling them. On the positive side, they don't stain, they don't absorb odors, they're non-porous, and they're dishwasher safe. But in my opinion, those things don't make up for how loud, unpleasant, and damaging they are to your knives. After all that testing and research, here's my advice for most home cooks. For your primary board, it's worth investing in a thicker and larger wood board. Yes, it requires some maintenance, but it's safe, relatively quiet, gentle on your knives, and it just feels much softer and nicer to cut on wood compared to these harder materials. My top pick is this teak house board. It performed really well in all my tests, and it's relatively inexpensive for its size. I also like having a composite board like this Epicurean as a second smaller board. It's thinner, lighter, and dishwasher safe. It's ideal for quick prep work or when you just don't feel like dealing with the bigger, heavier wood board. If you're still not sure which to buy, this chart breaks down the pros and cons of each option. I've linked to my top picks in the video description. If you're looking to upgrade more than just your cutting board, check out this video where I break down the best air fryers, or this video where I review the top food storage containers. And for more videos like this, click the logo to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.